Imagine holding a small copper-colored coin in your hand. At first glance it feels ordinary. Just 1 cent. Barely enough to notice. But look closer. The year reads 1998. The country is Canada. And suddenly this tiny coin begins to tell a much bigger story. This is the 1998 Canadian 1 cent coin. A coin that represents the end of an era. A coin that quietly disappeared from everyday use. And a coin that collectors around the world still search for today. Welcome to Royal Coin Value USA, where we don't just talk about coins. We uncover the history they carry, the changes they witnessed, and the value they hold beyond their face value. The Canadian 1 cent coin has a long and proud history. For over 150 years, it played a role in daily life. Used in shops, saved by children, dropped into jars, and passed through millions of hands. By 1998, Canada was already moving toward a modern economy. Inflation had reduced the purchasing power of the penny. And yet the Royal Canadian Mint continued to strike 1 cent coins. Because tradition still mattered. The 1998 1 cent coin was struck at the Royal Canadian Mint. It was made primarily of copper-plated zinc. This change in composition helped reduce production costs, while maintaining the familiar copper appearance Canadians recognized. The coin measures approximately 19 millimeters in diameter. It is lightweight, thin, and simple in design. On the obverse side, you see the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Her image represents stability, continuity, and monarchy. The portrait used on the 1998 cent shows the Queen facing right. Calm, dignified, and timeless. Around her portrait are the inscriptions. Elizabeth Roman II. DG Regina. These Latin words mean, Elizabeth II by the grace of God Queen. This inscription connects the coin to centuries of royal tradition, even on the smallest denomination. Now turn the coin over. The reverse features one of the most iconic symbols in Canadian coinage. The maple leaf. Simple, bold, proud. The maple leaf has been a symbol of Canada for generations. It represents nature, strength, unity, and national identity. Above the leaf you see the word Canada. Below it the date 1998. And at the bottom the denomination 1 cent. There is no clutter. No unnecessary detail. Just a clean, powerful design that speaks volumes. In 1998, millions of these coins were struck. They entered circulation across Canada. Used for small purchases, exact change, and everyday transactions. At the time, no one thought twice about them. They were commons, accessible, and often overlooked. But history had other plans. In the years that followed, the cost of producing the penny began to exceed its value. Public opinion shifted. Businesses stopped using them regularly. And eventually, Canada made a historic decision. In 2012, Canada officially ended the circulation of the 1 cent coin. The penny was phased out. Transactions were rounded, and an era quietly came to an end. That decision transformed coins like the 1998 1 cent into relics of everyday history. Not ancient, not rare in numbers, but rare in relevance. Collectors today look at the 1998 Canadian penny differently. Condition matters. Luster matters. Eras matter. A circulated example may be worth only a small premium. But an uncirculated coin with original mint luster can carry much higher collector interest. Some 1998 1 cent coins show striking errors. Off-center strikes, die cracks, weak strikes, or planchet issues. These errors turn an ordinary penny into a collector treasure. High-grade examples preserved in mint condition can command strong prices in the numismatic market, especially when certified and graded by professional services. What makes this coin special is not just money. It is memory. It reminds Canadians of a time when exact change mattered, when children collected pennies, and when small coins still had everyday meaning. For collectors outside Canada, this coin represents something even more powerful. A completed chapter. A denomination that no longer exists in circulation. Holding a 1998 Canadian 1 cent coin today is like holding the final pages of a long story. A story of tradition, economics, and national identity. At Royal Coin Value USA, we believe even the smallest coin deserves attention. Because history is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers. And the 1998 Canadian 1 cent is one of those whispers. A reminder that value is not always measured in cents, but in stories, moments, and the legacy left behind. So the next time you see a Canadian penny, especially one dated 1998, don't ignore it. Look again, because history is still there, quietly waiting to be noticed. You have probably held this coin in your hand without ever thinking twice about it. It felt light, small, almost worthless. You may have tossed it into a drawer, dropped it into a jar, or ignored it completely. But what if I told you that this tiny copper coin marks the quiet end of a century-long story? A story of everyday life, a story of changing economies, and a story of a denomination that no longer exists. This is not just a penny. This is the 1998 1 cent coin of Canada. And once you understand what it represents, you will never look at a Canadian penny the same way again. Welcome to Royal Coin Value USA, where we don't just talk about coins. We reveal the stories hidden inside them. In a fast-moving modern world, most people believe history lives in museums and textbooks. But real history often hides in plain sight. In your pocket, in your change, in coins that once passed through millions of hands without anyone noticing their importance. The 1998 Canadian 1 cent coin is exactly that kind of coin. At first glance, it seems ordinary, copper-colored, lightweight, simple, but this coin represents one of the final chapters of the Canadian penny, a denomination that served a nation for over 150 years. And then quietly disappeared. In 1998, no one knew this coin was living on borrowed time. No headlines announced it. No warnings were given. People spent it freely, unaware they were holding a piece of history nearing its end. That is what makes this coin so powerful today. It is not rare because of low mintage. It is not valuable because of gold or silver. It is important because it marks a turning point. A moment when tradition began to fade, and modern economics took control. To understand the 1998 Canadian 1 cent, we must step back, not just into numismatics, but into everyday life. Imagine Canada in the late 1990s. Stores still accepted pennies. Children still counted them. Exact change still mattered. A penny could still make the difference between buying something or not. The Royal Canadian Mint continued striking 1 cent coins year after year. Not because they were profitable, but because they were familiar, trusted, and deeply rooted in Canadian culture. The 1998 1 cent coin was struck during this quiet transition period, a time when the penny was still alive, but its future was already uncertain. This coin was made using copper-plated zinc, a change from earlier solid copper compositions. This shift reduced costs while maintaining the traditional look Canadians recognized. The coin measures approximately 19 millimeters across. Thin, light, easy to overlook. And yet its design carries powerful symbolism. On the obverse side appears Queen Elizabeth II, facing right, calm, steady, unchanging. Her portrait represents continuity, stability, and the enduring link between Canada and the monarchy. Surrounding her image are the words, Elizabeth Roman II DG Regina. These Latin words mean, Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen. Even on the smallest coin, tradition speaks. Now turn the coin over. The reverse is simple, clean, and unmistakably Canadian. A single maple leaf dominates the center. Not flashy, not complicated, just strong. The maple leaf has symbolized Canada for generations. It represents nature, unity, strength, and identity. Above it is the word Canada. Below it the date 1998. And at the bottom the denomination 1 cent. Nothing more, nothing less. This design remained unchanged for decades. Because it worked, in 1998, millions of these coins entered circulation. They moved through grocery stores, gas stations, coffee shops, and school cafeterias. They were used without thought, spent without care, forgotten without hesitation. But history does not care whether we notice it or not. It moves forward quietly. And years later, when Canada officially ended the circulation of the penny in 2012, coins like this one suddenly changed meaning. They were no longer money in motion. They became artifacts of a finished chapter. The 1998 Canadian 1-cent coin became a symbol of the last generation of pennies. Not the final year, but part of the final story. Collectors began to look closer, to check condition, to search for errors, to preserve uncirculated examples. Because once a coin disappears from circulation, its role changes forever. It no longer serves commerce. It serves memory. And that is where true numismatic value begins. At Royal Coin Value USA, we believe coins like this deserve attention, not because they are expensive, but because they are meaningful. In the next part of this story, we will dive deeper into how this coin was made, how it circulated, and why condition can transform a forgotten penny into a collector's prize. Because sometimes the smallest coin tells the biggest story, and we are only just getting started. To truly understand the 1998 Canadian 1-cent coin, we must step into the world it lived in. Not a museum, not a collector's album, but everyday Canada in the late 1990s. This was a time of transition, a time when technology was accelerating, when economies were modernizing, and when small things slowly began to lose their place. In 1998, Canada was changing. Debit cards were becoming common, electronic payments were growing, and cash transactions were no longer king. But the penny was still there. Quiet, persistent, familiar. People still used it out of habit. Not because it was powerful, but because it had always been there. Children counted pennies on kitchen tables. Parents dropped them into jars. Cashiers still asked, "Do you have the change?" The 1-cent coin was deeply woven into daily life. Yet its purchasing power had been shrinking for decades. By the late 1990s, 1 cent could buy almost nothing on its own. Prices had risen. Inflation had reshaped value, and the penny had become more symbolic than practical. Still, the Royal Canadian Mint continued to strike them, year after year, including in 1998. Why? Because removing a coin is not just an economic decision. It is an emotional one. Coins carry tradition, memory, and identity. The penny had been part of Canada since the 19th century. Removing it felt like erasing a small piece of national history. So the mint adapted instead of stopping. Earlier Canadian pennies were made of solid copper. Heavy, durable, rich in material. But by the 1990s, copper prices had risen sharply. Producing a copper penny was becoming expensive. Too expensive for a coin worth only 1 cent. The solution was subtle but important. The 1998 1-cent coin was made from zinc, with a thin copper plating on the surface. To the eye, it still looked like copper. To the hand, it felt lighter. To the economy, it was cheaper to produce. This change marked a turning point, not just in composition, but in philosophy. The penny was no longer made to last forever. It was made to survive a little longer. Millions of these coins were struck, not for collectors, not for history books, but for everyday use. They were poured into bags, loaded into machines, and released into circulation across the country. Most were destined for wear. Scratches, dents, loss. Very few were saved intentionally at the time, because no one believed the penny would disappear. And yet, quietly, conversations were already happening. Economists questioned the cost of production. Businesses complained about counting pennies. Banks noticed how many were never returned. The penny was slowing commerce, not supporting it. Still, in 1998, none of this was visible to the average person. Life moved on. The penny moved with it. This is what gives the 1998 1-cent coin its emotional weight today. It lived in the final normal years of the penny. Before debate became decision. Before tradition gave way to efficiency. Coins from this era tell a different story than older coins. They are not ancient. They are not exotic. They are familiar. And familiarity is powerful. Collectors today understand this. When they hold a 1998 Canadian penny, they are not holding rarity alone. They are holding a moment just before change. A pause. A breath. From a numismatic perspective, condition now becomes everything. Most 1998 pennies were circulated heavily. They rubbed against other coins. They lost their shine. They picked up marks. These coins today carry little premium, but they carry history. Then there are the survivors. Coins that were set aside, stored in rolls, forgotten in drawers, never spent. These uncirculated examples retain original mint luster, sharp details, clean surfaces, and this is where collector value begins to grow. A high-grade 1998 1-cent coin represents resistance to time. It avoided circulation, avoided wear, avoided loss. Professional grading services later became critical. They offered verification, protection, and trust. Because in modern coin collecting, trust defines value. But condition is only part of the story. Errors would add another layer. During mass production, perfection is impossible. Dies crack, planchets misalign, strikes go wrong. And when they do, history leaves fingerprints. Some 1998 Canadian pennies show die cracks running through the maple leaf. Others show off-center strikes, weak details, or plating flaws. To the untrained eye, these look like damage. To collectors, they are evidence of the minting process itself. These errors are accidental, unplanned, and rare. They transform an ordinary coin into a conversation piece. At Royal Coin Value USA, we always remind collectors of one thing. Never clean a coins. Cleaning destroys original surfaces, removes luster, and erases history. A cleaned penny may look shiny, but its value is permanently damaged. Preservation is respect. As the years pass, fewer high-grade 1998 pennies remain. Loss, damage, melting, neglect. Scarcity at the top quietly increases. And this is why modern coins deserve attention now, not later. In the next part of this story, we will step even closer. We will examine the design in detail, the symbolism, the human choices behind every line and curve. Because even the simplest design carries intention. And the maple leaf has more to say than most people realize. Stay with Royal Coin Value USA, because the story of this small coin is far from finished.